So finally, and I will forever have the picture. If you ever see us live, come and ask us, and we'll show it to you. But we had to get a receipt for giving these guys money. And so the PI had him stand up against the fence. It's my favorite picture. Standing up against the fence, holding $3,500 in cash each.
The reason they said no was because their sons and nephews kept showing up. These are kids, they're like 18, 19, 20 years old, don't know about anything, don't care about anything. They were like, I've looked it up on Zillow. This property's worth $250,000. You guys need to get more money.
You know, I would always, you know me, I'll always push back on that a little bit. I say, some days we got $1 million deals to work on, and some days we got $50,000 deals to work on. We can't just not work on a deal. Otherwise, we're just sitting with our hands on our lap. All right, if you like a messy deal, you are really going to like the deal we have to talk about today. This was actually the very first deal we did when we spun up, targeting distressed real estate deals. 1 acre of infill dirt in Houston, Texas. This is about as messy as the deals get. And for us, it was one of our first deals. So it really taught us a lot and influenced how we run the distressed acquisition business today. So if that interests you, sit back, tune in, and enjoy the Stafford, Texas deal.
So I was thinking that the Stafford deal is the right one to talk about next, because we haven't really talked to the audience about what it looks like when a deal gets tough. You know, when we as the investors get stuck, and what it means to work through getting stuck. And there were some characters we met along the way, and this was as far as like quality assets go, I mean, this is better than vacant land, right? There's a structure on it, but this was not a nice house.
No, I was just thinking, I don't even remember. This one was so long ago. I think I've like black holed this in my brain that we did this deal, but yeah, it was a good one. Lay it out for us.
Okay, so this one I remember very vividly and very clearly because it was actually our very first distressed deal. It took a relatively long time to close it. So we did and closed a couple of other deals before this one wrapped up finally. But I remember being really pumped and excited about it because it was number one. And the way it got started was this brother with a 25% interest in the property. He responded to, a cold call or a text message and was like, super positive, super enthusiastic. And I think we bought his 25% for $500 or something like that.
Oh, no. This was the guy who tried to not even take the money, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he had money. He was not hard up for cash. For him, the issue was that, he had two brothers who were actually living on the property. They were like these Mexican dudes in their 60s, total hippies, like chillers, not working, not very responsible. And they just, from this guy's perspective, they couldn't get out of their own way. He had tried to help them with the taxes, and he had tried to help them with jobs and tried to help them in other ways in life. And they just continued to get themselves in more trouble. Like they never, the money that he gave them for the taxes didn't go to the taxes. Guys didn't show up for the interviews that he set up for them. They were like, and he was kind of like, you know what? I'm tired of helping them. They become a black hole of energy and emotion for me. And our co-ownership of this house is the last vestige of that relationship. And he wanted to snip it.
Yeah, I remember we made contact with him, and I don't remember who was talking to him. Anyway, I'll save names. But I think I remember who was talking to him, and we were like, oh, he wants to sell his third of the house. And we're like, okay, how much? And he didn't even want the money. I remember specifically he wanted to just be done. He wanted to not deal, which was a learning lesson. We really needed him. But he said, I'll sign it. You can take it. I just don't want to deal with the property or my brothers anymore.
Yeah. And I remember talking to him about his brothers. I'm like, hey, we need your interest, but we can't stop there. we're going to be buying up everybody else's interest. How are your brothers going to respond? And he's like, they're broke. They're going to get pumped. Throw $500 at them and they're going to be an immediate yes. And this was a very important lesson because we were like, oh, well, that sounds great. They're going to be a yes. Good. We'll pay this guy. We'll get the deed. We'll record it. And then we'll go talk to these other fellas.
And for the listeners, this was maybe just over an acre of infill land in a gentrifying area of Houston, I would say.
It was in a really unusual little spot. Do you remember? It was on a corner with some commercial development nearby, some major residential development nearby, but there was like a landscaping supply place immediately next to it, piles of mulch and everything.
And when the realtor went out later, or I don't remember who told us, but somebody told us it stunk because of the landscape thing. It was almost the nail in the coffin for me on that deal.
They were right.
Yeah, so it was 1 acre of infill, it was gentrifying. If you were able to assemble some land in that area, you could do a really cool, unique commercial deal. But we were so ready to wash our hands of this property, we moved on. So that was the asset, and I don't think the taxes were crazy. They were like $30K, $20K, $30K.
Yeah, something like that, in the ballpark of 30, maybe 32.5.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were right around there. And so we said, hey, we got the third of it for $500. We got these other two guys who are broke and need the money. So, worst case, we have to pay them $5K or $10K, we thought. We still got a deal. And I don't remember what we thought it was going to sell for. Do you remember what it actually sold for?
$195.
$195?
Pretty sure.
Oh, dang. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember it selling for a little more than I thought. But at first, I don't even think we knew that it was going to sell for that much.
You know why it sold for so much? Because it was actually two lots. They were using it as a single home site, but there were two, I don't know if it was grandfathered in or if there's just no zoning regulations there, but you could put two new houses there.
And I think it's coming back to me. The taxes on this one I think they were like $40K, because I think we ended up having to pay the majority of them, didn't we?
Yeah, this was a situation where we got into this deal because the property was already listed for tax sale, right? So there was a ticking clock, and we were racing against it. And what we did in that situation to stop the tax sale was to pay most of the taxes.
Was this the one that we accidentally paid all the taxes on?
I think it was, and I think it's because there were two lots. Typically, when a property goes up for tax sale, they flip a switch on the tax collector's website, so you can't make any payments that way. You got to go through the law firm handling the foreclosure. But for whatever reason, they hadn't done it for these two lots. And I went in and I was looking at one of the tax accounts, and I paid the whole thing, thinking it was, I don't know what I was thinking, but that was the issue. And then suddenly one lot was paid up in full, but the other one hadn't been and was still at risk of being sold. So we're like, all right, I guess we're paying the second one off too. Or it wasn't everything, but it was like most of the taxes.
So let's back up a little bit. So why did we even have to pay the taxes?
Yeah, good question. So if there's a tax sale schedule for a property, there are only a few ways to stop it. Like truly stop it, get the property pulled from the tax sale. There are other strategies for kicking the can down the road, which we'll talk about some other time. But in order to stop a tax sale, you got to put money up. You either got to pay it off in full. You have to get a payment plan and start paying it down. Usually if you get a payment plan from the taxing authorities, the terms suck. It's like 50% up front, and you got 6 months, 9 months. Or you got to get a loan or find the money some other way and use that to get the taxes paid up. There are no other shortcuts, typically.
Well, there can be some other shortcuts, but in this situation, I was more alluding to why were we not able to get this deal structured in a way. I was asking you a question, a leading question. Like in theory, we should have just bought the brother's deed, then gone and got the other two deeds, And probably before we even needed to make a tax payment, we could have, in theory, sold this thing and not even have had to pay much of the taxes.
Yeah, well, we learned a really important lesson on this one. The guys who were living at the property, they didn't have cell phones, right? You remember, we had go-betweens, like we had a private investigator, we had other people, and communication was extremely difficult. But after a lot of back and forth, they essentially said to us, "Hey, listen, if we sell our interest to you, we have to leave the house. Whatever money we get is going to be what we live off of for the next chapter of our lives. We need more than $500. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why did your brother think you would take $500 and walk? That's like, in retrospect, it was a stupid thing to say and a stupid thing to believe, because the practicalities of it, when you have an interest holder living in the home, are that they need real money to relocate and get themselves set up. And that's what we ran into. That's why we had to do something with the tax sale.
And if I remember correctly, at first, we didn't even know they were living there. We knew that they frequented the property, and their brother said that they bounced around from place to place. But we didn't know that, the house was a generous word. It was like no doors, no windows. It was an open air shack. They were mostly living in tents on the property. But that's something that we didn't really clarify. And I think that when we bought his interest as well, there was a few things I think we could have done differently. One, I think procedurally, we probably actually could have got that tax sale stopped. I don't think all the true heirs were named in the suit, but I think we were very late to the party. I think we were so late that getting some sort of temporary injunction or some sort of bill of review was like, it was kind of outside our zone of like, do we know we can do this or not? It was like, maybe we can, but the easier way was just to pay the tax bill. And so I remember us buying his interest, and while we were negotiating with the brothers paying the taxes, because we basically had to decide at one point, I just remember this, we had to decide, okay, I've paid this guy $500, I paid another $2,000 in nonsense of PI, the private investigator go between, somebody to go to the property, whatever else. So we had to say, more or less, did we want to just take a $5,000 loss? Right? I'm going to round up. Do we just want to take a $5,000 loss because we couldn't get the brothers to accept a deal with us? We couldn't even get in touch with them for a while because they didn't have cell phones. Eventually, we had a combination of one of their nephews or something had a cell phone. They would take to them, and our private investigator would take messages out to them and like hold the cell phone up while we talked to them. But, you can imagine that takes time. And so we continued. That took a lot longer to even get to a hard no from them that they weren't going to sell. I think they won like $100,000 a piece or something, which was bonkers. And so, so that's what we had to do. We had to choose, do we want to just ripcord this thing, let the money go, or do we want to pay and stop the tax sale and really sink our feet in? We'll say again later, we probably wouldn't have done this deal again, but we didn't, this was our first deal and had some opportunity in front of us. So we decided to keep going.
Yeah. But one of the big takeaways from this deal and some other things we worked on in 2024 is that when you have an interest holder who's living on the property, that is potentially a problem, and you need to address it at the front end, really before a significant amount of money goes out the door, because your options for dealing with somebody like that are pretty limited. They own a piece of the property. Not easy to get them kicked off. You have to go to court. You have to pay the lawyer. You have to go the full distance. And, if they're a sympathetic figure, and these guys were kind of sympathetic figures, you're going to look like the bad guy if you're kicking them out. But I don't know if you remember this, but there's another cast of characters involved here.
Hold on. Before you cast those characters, I just want to say, we typically, we've turned a lot of deals down because we didn't want to kick somebody out of a house, right? We don't want to kick somebody off their property, or their property is subjective because they kind of don't really own it anymore, but the county is about to own it. I digress. This one I didn't feel as bad. Maybe I'm just rationalizing for myself, but these guys were doing drugs on the property. It was a crazy nuisance. It was a full health code violation. Like, there was no permit to actually occupy this property. There was no, like, the house wouldn't have passed any sort of inspection. There was like a burned down mobile home in the front of the property. Like, this one needed, like, it was a good deed to clean that property up, let somebody scrape it. It really needed to be industrial or commercial or something, but it was just homeless vagrants. Like, I don't know if you remember when we talked to the neighbor, because I was thinking, I was trying to buy all their properties and do a commercial play there, but she was thrilled to know that they were going to be leaving soon. And which, in retrospect, we're like, we probably should have told her that. Maybe we could have negotiated that deal better. But everybody, there were a couple of houses next door. They were a huge, huge nuisance. Drugs, legal activity. And so this one, it wasn't like we're kicking an old lady out the house. It was, two people who, if you're going to do that stuff, don't do it here, right? Don't do it on this property. It was right next to a school. You remember that? Like, there was the school, like, the adjoining lot, one to the north, was a elementary school. So, like, I don't know. There was all that added up to where I didn't feel bad, because our fallback was pay the lawyer. That's where all the profit will go. But eventually we'll get the deal done and we'll sell it. But anyway, another cast of characters. I'll send it back to you.
Just to complete the story arc there, at the end, these guys got paid really well on this deal, because we eventually decided to just partner with them. It was the only way to get the deal done on a reasonable time frame without spending a lot of money, our money up front. But they used the money that they earned from the sale of the property to build a new place to live on their son's property. Their son lived nearby, had some acreage, had space to put a new house. So they built essentially a tiny house. New construction, higher quality, utilities, no hole in the roof, no hole in the floor, no wild animals running in and out. It was just from the outside looking in. This sounds very paternalistic, but it seemed like a change for the better.
I actually didn't know that until just now. So
yeah. We wound up talking a lot to the son who did the building or coordinated towards the end. But it was the three brothers. They were the main ones because they each held 25% of the property. But there's an older brother who had passed away, and there were three kids underneath him. So we called them the 8%ers. And we were talking about them for a long time. It took forever to get them locked up. They were all very disconnected, didn't spend really any time at all at the property. And one of them actually shook us down for like $5,000. Do you remember this? It was the woman.
I remember this.
Yeah, so her husband was a business guy, very sharp. Yeah, and he was like, hey, I've looked at it. I've done the math. He's like, you guys might sue us for contribution. I'll stroke a check. I'll pay for it to maintain our equity position in the property. He said, or you can pay us $5,000 right now.
I remember that, yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that is a complete analysis. That is a good take on the situation.
That is full and fair market value for your position.
Yeah. But we did it, and we got that done very quickly. And from there, we really started to build some momentum, right? Because not long after that, we started to have more productive discussions with the two brothers. And eventually, we put a partnership deal together. We called it
Let's double click into that a little. Let's get into that a little. So we had a few deals we were close to where we'd send Keith out, the private investigator. He'd take paperwork with terms that we'd mostly agreed on. And they'd get there, and the notary would come, and then they would renege. And I think we did that 2 or 3 times. And they were generally just increasing cash positions, varying levels of cash now, cash later. And we eventually got to the 3rd or 4th offer where it was kind of like our highest and best. Like, we're not going any higher than this. It's lawsuit. It's this or lawsuit, right? And that offer was basically what you're laying out is, hey, you guys own 50%, we own 50%. Let's just go sell it together at this point, right? And all the taxes and fees will be taken out, and then we'll split the proceeds at closing. And we sent that offer out there with Keith. They said they were going to sign it, and then once again, they said no. I was like, there's no better offer. This is full market value. It just means you got to move.
Hey guys, what's up? Clint here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. I just want to let you know you are listening right now to a lot of jargon, a lot of different strategies and things that probably all require their own 30-minute episode. And I wanted to jump in and tell you on January 23rd, we are going to be hosting a webinar where I am going to be going in depth on a lot of these different topics. If you've ever been to one of my webinars, you know that they are not fluff. They're all value. I spend a lot of time doing them, so I only do a couple of them a year. So if you're interested in going a little deeper on a lot of the things we're talking about, check out the description, or you can just go to our website, learn.land, to get registered, and you'll be added to the list. And yeah, on January 23rd, we're going to be going over a lot of the strategies as well as how you can start finding these deals. So I think it's going to be super beneficial. Check out the description and go to our website to get registered. Okay, jumping back into the episode.
Yeah. And the reason they said no was because their sons and nephews kept showing up. These are kids, they're like 18, 19, 20 years old, don't know about anything, don't care about anything. They were like, I've looked it up on Zillow. This property's worth $250,000. You guys need to get more money. These guys are ripping you off. And we're like, kids, the property's about to be lost at tax sale. You know, and like your uncle and your dad, they have 25% each. You know, the amount they might be able to claim in excess proceeds is, it's going to be 25% of nothing. But, it's really hard to say to a dad or say to an uncle, don't listen to your child. They don't know what they're talking about.
And also to sell that property through traditional transaction, you're going to need to hire an attorney to clean the title up, get everybody on the same page, including the disgruntled brother, the two guys living on the property, the three nephews, the one savvy one. I mean, that deal was very encumbered. And, they were probably right to go back and say, well, hey, your share is in theory worth more. It's like, yeah, how you going to get it, right? I just paid the taxes of your property. If I have to sue you for contribution, you're probably going to get zero. It's in my best interest to sue you and foreclose on you and take the property. But we're making you an offer here to partner together. Frankly, because I think we were a few months in on that deal at that point, a few months and probably about 3 months. And we were just like, let's get this damn thing off our books. Let's get this thing out of here. So we finally just stopped making cash offers and we, okay, great. They're going to partner with us. And then they said no. So what do we do at that point? Leading question.
Well, what did we do when they said no to the partnership offer?
Yeah.
We did like a demand letter, like a pre-litigation letter.
No, we did the demand letter and we did the draft complaint.
Oh, we did?
Because we had done that. We had already had to do it. So we had already had to do the demand letter for whenever we were getting the other interest. That's what got that guy to call us who wanted $5,000 and how we were eventually able to go get the other two nephews. But they got the demand letter. They didn't give a shit. They didn't care about that thing. And so I remember it was Easter weekend. And Trent had finished like the draft complaint because we had said we have no other options. Like we literally threw our hands in the air. You were like, screw it. We'll put all this money on the back burner. It'll be worth 3 times more in a year or 6 months when this litigation's over. But we're just going to have to go that route and force the sale or sue for contribution, force the sale. And I remember it was the day before or after Easter because I remember thinking about it over Easter. I'll never forget that. Of like, Trent finishes the complaint. We're all like redlining it over email. We say, okay, this is basically good to go. And I think you and I talked, we're like, let's hold off on filing this just for one more day. Let's have Keith take it back out there. Let's have our PI take it back out there, printed it off 40 or 50 pages, whatever it was, and takes it back out and it's just, hey, like, I don't think you and I were even on the, like on alert when this happened. I think he just took it back out. And I was like, hey, this is the lawsuit. Here it is, right? This is going on record tomorrow. And we're moving forward. And I think they called us that night. Yeah, called us back. Sorry, they called us back that night. And they wanted like green cash. They're like, okay, bring us this much money by like tomorrow or something. It will be this deal with you guys.
Yeah, that was the tipping point. And that's what we did. We sent like $7,000 through Western Union to the PI. He took out cash, hand delivered it to these fellas, just stacks of greenbacks right in the front yard. Part of our deal with them, because we didn't actually have 50% at that point, we had 25 plus 8 1/3, because there were 2 8%ers still holding out. We told them, listen, we'll do a partnership with you, but you got to get these other 2 8%ers to give us their deeds, which they eventually did. And then in order, as part of the JV agreement, the two brothers deeded us their interest so we could go to market and properly control the sales process. And that's what we did.
So finally, and I will forever have the picture. If you ever see us live, come and ask us. We'll show it to you. But we had to get a receipt for giving these guys money. And so the PI had them stand up against the fence. It's my favorite picture. Standing up against the fence, holding $3,500 in cash each. Just this is the funniest picture. Receipt of earnest money or whatever you would call it.
We didn't even ask for that. The PI was just so nervous about handling the money and not being accused of anything. I'd given him like a form bill of sale or whatever to have the guy sign. I was like, if you need something here, have him sign this, but I trust you. But that wasn't enough. He was like, guys, get together. The two guys were like looking super confused, holding their money up.
Gosh, they looked like they were on something, but
yeah.
Okay, so we get it. We finally get the deed. What did we spend on a lawyer for that one? I think we spent $4,000.
It was something like that. It was not a crazy amount. It was under $5,000 because really was letter writing, a draft complaint.
It was like
a little consulting.
It was $3,500 for the attorney, and we spent like probably, this is the largest PI bill we've had, simply because we had to, anytime we had to talk, we had to send him out there. I think he probably made 15 or 20 trips. I think that was $2,500. So we were on about $5,000 in legal and courier expenses, I guess. We're in for $5,000 there. We're in for $500,000 for the other deeds. We're in for about, I don't know, $12,000, something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we were at around 13 or thereabouts. And then with the taxes, we were within spitting distance of $30,000, maybe 35.
Yeah. So we were in for 13 for all the miscellaneous deeds. Taxes were about 35. So that's 48. So we're in for $48,000, round up, call it 50. I think that one interesting thing let's finish this real quick. So we're in for $50,000. You sell for $195,000. We get all our money back out. And then I think we cleared about $50,000 on this deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it sold for $195,000. Net closing proceeds was probably about $185,000. And out of the $185,000, we got our $40,000 back for the taxes that we spent. So we're down to $145,000. And then we had another miscellaneous $13,000. Basically took it down to $130,000. And then we split it with them after that, 50-50.
Yeah, that was the deal that we structured. We say, hey, listen, we'll sell it together, but the very first thing we're going to do with the net sales proceeds is pay ourselves back, including for the few deeds that we'd already picked up at that point. And I think at the end of the day, we wrote them checks, or we did transfers to their kids, like $26,000 in change for each of them.
That was in addition to the $7,500 we already gave them. Yeah. So yeah, both sides of the equation made about $60,000 on that deal. So this is a question I've been battling because, we're going to run our upcoming program on teaching how to do these deals. And so a question I've been battling myself was, if somebody comes to me and asks me, they show me a deal like this, and they ask me if they should do the deal, if I should say yes or no. And I go back and forth on it, because was this a deal that we would do today, we probably would start the deal based on the numbers, and then we would get 2 steps into it and realize, yeah, I don't know if we're going to mess with that one, right? Or, I mean, honestly, I'm even thinking that we still might do it. I mean, it wasn't, we're a lot better at it now too, so we probably wouldn't have made so many mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
But it's like, should we have done that deal? I don't know. I say yes in hindsight. I generally always say yes if we do a deal because we learned a ton. We learned so much on that deal. 4 months to get a deal done isn't that bad, right? I mean, it was 4 months of like, is this deal ever going to get done? But at the end of the day, once we solved the problem, we did get the deal done and make $60K on it. So I don't know. I would probably lean towards yes. I'd probably lean towards yes because A, you have a great story to tell, and B, it's, the numbers are sound, and the whole time we were protected on this deal from a legal and civil procedural side too.
That's a key point. There was never a point where we were really underwater as far as risk went. We always had an exit strategy if things continue to go sideways.
Yeah. And we got to it. Like we got to the ripcord of, all right, we're just going to have to file suit. And because, the good part is if we would have filed suit, unless those guys could have came up with probably $80,000, which obviously they could not have, we would have got the rest of the interest for, our legal cost. And so it really made more sense for us to just say, you know what, we've tried hard enough with you guys, just enjoy the lawsuit. And whether it takes 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, pretty much knowing our opponents in that situation, we weren't going to lose, right? Mm-hmm. We were co-owners. We'd advance contribution. They needed to either pay us back or we'd have the right to seek foreclosure in their interest. So if we would have gone that route, we could have made an additional, 60-ish thousand maybe. But then you got to subtract all of our legal costs. So $40K. It's like, let's just get this thing done and not worry about that. But we always had a backstop. And as we showed, we went to the backstop to our final option, unfortunately. But hey, we didn't have to sue. We got out of it and we made $60,000. Not a bad day.
Yeah, and it happened to be the best possible result for the 2 brothers living on the property. I think it was Norberto and Ernesto.
A win-win-win.
Yeah, it was great. I think it was a really good result. And I distinctly remember us talking, especially in like the last month or two, about, if you take what we're actually going to walk away with and you divide it by the number of months and how much team time we were putting into it, like this doesn't make a ton of financial sense. But we just kept coming back to the fact that we just got a crash course on distressed acquisitions, and that alone has made us hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. And, I would always, me, I'll always push back on that a little bit. I say some days we got $1 million deals to work on and some days we got $50,000 deals to work on. We can't just not work on a deal. Otherwise we're just sitting with our hands on our lap. So that's part of the business is you got to take on deals that are a little more challenging and stretch you out a little bit. But, I think the things that we learned in that deal and some of the negotiation practices, some of the contacts we made, some of the professional service providers, some of the strategies we used, I think have really informed how we run this business today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest takeaways was just being a little more sensitive to the fact that dealing with people, interest holders who are living on the property, is something you need to take seriously, and you need to navigate it early in the deal. But you're right, we picked up a bunch of other stuff. We established relationships with a couple of professional service providers on that deal, people we continue to work with today. That was a great deal.
Yep. All right, I'm going to do an outro real quick. All right, guys, as always, if you enjoy this kind of content, do us a huge favor. We're doing this podcast free. It's all for you guys. If you just go to Apple Podcasts, like and review. If you leave a 5-star review and tell us what you like about the podcast, which episodes excited you, we would really, really appreciate that. Starting on the next episode, I'm going to start pulling the reviews from Apple Podcasts and just saying thank you to whoever wrote them. So if you would do us a huge favor,
like, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps this show. And thanks for joining in, guys. We'll see you on the next one.